Sitting here, I feel a mix of delight and terror. Despite how terrifying it is, this is incredibly entertaining. Hello, Alan Hibbard and Mike Maloney here again with the Gold Silver Show. Hey Alan, how's it going? Mike, I'm doing fine. Concerning gold and international central banks, I would like to make a brief comment. Significant actions are emanating from the BRICS countries, central banks worldwide, and Russia and China in particular. There are thus significant tendencies in the gold market. This is where the story begins, with this startling news. Gold trading on the St. Petersburg Exchange will commence in Russia. So, this was released approximately 2 weeks ago. You may find a section of that article here. Russia, which produces more gold than any other country, second only to China, plans to stop having its gold price determined by the London Stock Exchange. They also aim to begin trading gold on the SPIMEX, St. Petersburg Exchange, by year's end. One of their primary goals is to establish a competitive price in the market. That is to say, something that cannot be changed. Wink, wink. Consequently, the London Stock Exchange's price benchmarks were the de facto standard for the gold market until quite recently. It looks like the London Stock Exchange has some new rivals now, Mike. Holy cow. The American commodities trade is one issue that is left out of this piece. Competition for London is just one aspect of this. This is a competitive world, and it's fantastic. We benefit from more unfettered competition in the market. Furthermore, there is a mountain of evidence that implies, if not directly demonstrates, that the gold and silver prices have been subject to extensive manipulation over the years. On top of that, some of it is traders' manipulation for the short term, which has led to the incarceration of traders. That being said, this is helpful. This makes it considerably more difficult to manipulate in the way that Wall Street desires. Thus, the fact that this is taking place is fantastic. In addition, you and I both contributed to the chapter on the increased accessibility of the gold bull market when we were writing the book. In the 1970s bull market, when the price of gold increased by more than 25 times between January 1970 and January 1980, the population was almost 18 times higher. A portion of it is this. Find out the gold price on a global scale. The worldwide spot price of gold is affected by anyone's purchase of gold in Russia. In the 1970s, there were no marketplaces for gold purchases made in the countries of the Soviet Union, China, or Russia. Even though somebody could purchase gold from another person, it wouldn't affect the spot price on a worldwide scale. No record of that purchase or sale could be found. So, for those who have money invested in precious metals, this is great news. I couldn't agree with you more. Additionally, it does indicate that the East and West are becoming more separated, which may not be a desirable thing in and of itself, but is definitely beneficial to gold and price discovery in this context. The piece thus proceeds as follows, blah blah blah. Here, Russia is the obvious producer of gold, while the UK isn't involved at all. And there are substantial metal reserves in Russia. Aside from its own reserves, London does not own the majority of the stock that it holds, but both it and New York have a huge depository for international gold. Since the UK usually makes it difficult to transfer stocks, this gold is effectively detained the moment any nation attempts to assert sovereignty over its own gold. Thus, not only is the price being manipulated, but the actual location of the metal is also being manipulated. That being said, Russia's action in this area has the potential to stop it or significantly complicate it. It seems like they're holding on to some resentment due to past events, and I can understand why. I understand. I know what you mean. Alright, this concludes the article. Russia keeps its own gold reserves on the country's territory, and it is also a major producer of the precious metal. Russia is taking a significant step towards de-dollarization and financial independence by purchasing gold to store in its reserves rather than keeping currency from hostile nations. So, Russia might be able to wean itself off of precious metal prices set by the London Stock Exchange. This is therefore yet another milestone on the road to de-dollarization and economic autonomy. Additionally, they argue that US dollars should be used as central bank reserves rather than currencies from hostile nations. This is because US treasuries have traditionally been the default. And when they speak of hostile nations, they mean us. Yes, that is aimed squarely at our group. I guess so. I agree. So far, so good. It's intriguing that they chose the London Stock Exchange as their primary topic of discussion, ignoring the US and the Commodities Exchange. I suppose it would be more accurately called the London LBMA rather than the Stock Exchange. However, it has been deflected. They don't come out as openly insulting. However, when it comes to keeping currencies from hostile nations, I would assume that their dollar reserves were substantially larger than their British pound reserves prior to our freezing their assets and so on. The piece never once mentions the United States, although it is clearly aimed at that country. This is fascinating. Very much so. Russia is that. My attention is now going to China. Gold demand in China, not just from the central bank, but from the country as a whole. The demand for gold in China is currently surging, and this isn't limited to the country's central bank. The demand for gold exchange-traded funds, ETFs, in China reached an all-time high in the first half of 2025, as seen in the following chart. You can observe that the current height is significantly higher than the height during the past decade in this figure, which is comprised of the first and second quarters joined together. Approximately 4 times as much as this. So yes, demand has increased significantly. As stated here, the demand for gold in China has never been higher. To all appearances, that is the case. That, my friend, is the rationale behind the meteoric climb in the price of gold during the past 15 months. People in the United States aren't shopping like crazy, and they should be. Amidst all the geopolitical difficulties, there is this one magnificent measure. It's simply another example of how every president and politician, not only presidents but Congress as well, are involved. Politics is their game. They make a number of claims. Take a look at what transpired. Our job was to rein in budget deficits and deficit expenditure. There was an explosion. Furthermore, such explosion ensures, without a doubt, that the value of your dollar will decrease significantly in the years to come. It can only go in one way. Yes, I feel the same way. As a result, you should diversify your holdings away from the dollar and into something more stable, like gold, which no one can regulate. I see. Indeed, it was in China that the solution was found. Sooner or later, the United States will also understand it. With the recent price spike, central banks have been purchasing gold from local mines at an increasing rate. Here we have Lobo Tigre. Here he tweeted a quote from an article stating that 19 out of 36 respondents in the World Gold Council's recent poll of central banks are purchasing gold directly from domestic small-scale and artisanal miners using local currency. Thus, that is undoubtedly intriguing. They are under no obligation to report that, which is an intriguing aspect. It is public knowledge if they are purchasing from another central bank. However, there's no need for them to declare it if they are purchasing it from small-scale miners and related parties. They can evade the problem in a roundabout way. It is only a survey, by the way. Either they're being truthful because it's in their nature to do so, or they're intentionally misleading me, but I don't perceive it that way. Here we can examine a different section of that article. The story doesn't end there. 4 more central banks are considering doing the same. This represents a marginal increase over last year's poll, when about 14 out of 57 central banks reported sourcing domestically. Consequently, I paused to consider whether or not those figures were marginally higher after seeing them. Based on my calculations, 14 out of 57 is below 25%, whereas 19 out of 36 is above 25%, 50%. A little over a quarter is becoming slightly over half. From previous year, this has doubled. Over twice as much. Holy cow, yes, it is enormous. It is my assumption that these nations do not belong to the Western First World, that other nations are attempting to play a starring role in the impending global event. They are well informed about the future and are making preparations accordingly. They can also be underreporting their level of readiness. At the moment, we are able to exert our influence since our nation possesses more gold than any other in the globe. I don't know if that's accurate or not right now. We have no idea. Sure, I understand. To top it all off, American allies are disappearing at an alarming rate. This is why these other nations are teaming up. Therefore, when combined, they might have more gold on hand than the US has. That might be a better yardstick than comparing the US to any one nation. Indeed, it is true that many of these central banks originate from smaller nations, as you suspected. Look, there's a quote within. A growing number of domestic small-scale gold mines have sprung up in response to the increased price of the precious metal, and some central banks are beginning to purchase gold directly from these miners. This trend is particularly noticeable in Latin America and Africa. Thus, it's no surprise that those banks respond to a rise in the price of gold by opening more and more mines. Over the course of a few years, they increase their mining activity and new ones become online. That is in fact going to happen. You could say it's less expensive than buying gold on the global market, as many of these central banks purchase gold at a small discount to its worldwide price. That is one reason why it is attractive to them. As you pointed out, they could even be able to pull it off covertly. In the past, central banks have gotten their hands on gold through the London-based worldwide over-the-counter market. London pops up once more. Gold is traded through large bullion banks that use fiat currencies such as dollars, euros, and pounds. I see another kind of estrangement from London. I don't know if it's a coincidence or not. Perhaps a larger global trend is diverging from the West. Additional news item here. The West ought to be frightened by what transpired in Rio recently. Yes, somewhat spectacular maybe. However, in the midst of the rapidly changing global political and economic scene, the 17th BRICS summit was recently held in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. This summit marked a major milestone for the organization. This is the 17th BRICS summit, all right? There are a lot of activities. There are instances when it's all for show, but this is where I wanted to emphasize the one important point. On the path from mutual aid in the economy to a guarantee of national safety, this is located. At the summit, the long-standing goal of Russia and a number of other BRICS nations, the adoption of national currencies for all transactions, was given special attention. Reducing reliance on dominating reserve currencies is an important goal, and the leaders have recognized this and supported this trend. You can't really be referring to the dollar without mentioning it, can you? Yeah, I see. So, yep, I began providing reports on this in 2009. It all began with a succession of events that led up to the demise of the US dollar as a global currency. Furthermore, their encounter in Rio would be even another last nail. I guess so. Witnessing your presentation with the nails was, without a doubt, one of the most captivating visuals for me. I recall the nails rapidly descending in this manner. I couldn't help but think, this is a major trend. Because of this, the plot is developing slowly. Things often move at a glacial pace right up until they stop. After that, they occur rapidly. Very much so. At first slowly, and then all of a sudden. Very lovely. The question, what is the West doing, may so arise. So, for example, what is their reaction to this? Will they simply stand back and let BRICS figure things out? At least Trump spoke out. To this, Trump replied. He mentioned that BRICS members are obligated to pay 10%. Is that correct? The reason he just imposed fresh tariffs on all BRICS countries is that they were all intentionally designed to hit America. Our dollar was devalued and dethroned as the benchmark when BRICS was established. If they're interested in playing that game, that's okay. I am also capable of playing the game. To be honest, I have 2 points to make regarding that. I can't believe he still believes they are paying it after all this time. No, we'll have to pay for it. There will be a 10% increase on everything originating from a BRICS country right now. The importer must also pass the tax on to the consumer. Therefore, the additional 10% will be paid for by both of us and by all of the viewers. Plus, it's yet another tax that we have to pay to the United States government. It is unrelated to their situation. The goal is to reduce the speed of their trading. Yet, international trade slows down as a result, and global GDP slows down even more. Plus, it's harmful to everyone. Another issue is the involvement of Congress. It has dawned on me that a large portion of our audience leans Republican. Here, That is the foundation. There they are, on the right. As I've mentioned before, I lean toward libertarianism. I find myself sitting here, simultaneously amused and horrified. I am thoroughly enjoying this. Watching this back and forth petty drama is terrifying though. Congress is utterly careless and utterly out of touch. The power to unilaterally raise or lower taxes on anything is not something that Trump should have. Every single day, week after week, something new happens here. Due to my own apprehension, I have reduced the pace of my acquisitions. It was my intention to buy a few items. Additionally, the necessary components are imported by a US-based corporation. However, due to the tariffs, they stated that it will be this much extra. A few months down the road, I receive a revised quotation informing me that the price has dropped due to the reduction in tariffs. That transaction, though, has yet to be made. I will fail miserably. The result was a slowdown in GDP for both the US and Puerto Rico. Therefore, tariffs are a terrible idea, no matter where you are. Those are useless. They do harm to all those involved, in any case. Plus, nations, commodities, or weapons will traverse boundaries, correct? In other words, limiting trade and sowing discord among nations brings them one step closer to conflict. Therefore, that is also not the way to proceed. I see. Yeah, it's bad for both of those things. Now that we're talking about conflicts, here's today's meme. Currency wars. Is victory in sight? Not in my opinion. This is something we've done previously, but it fits perfectly this time. Please accept my sincere appreciation for tuning in. Also, I'd want to express my gratitude to Alan for organizing this lecture. My gratitude, Mike. Translated by turboscribe.ai. If you want this message removed, you need to go to unlimited.